The sky over Nairobi had no warning. One moment it was clear, the golden sun bathing the Kenyan savannah in radiant warmth. The next, a fracture opened in the atmosphere, silent, cold, and geometric, as if the air itself had been unzipped. People on the street stopped, staring upward in confusion. Children playing near Uhuru Park pointed skyward, not in fear but awe. Then they appeared. 3 colossal vessels, matte black and angular, descended without sound. No heat, no propulsion trails, no sonic booms. Just gravity-defying grace. They moved like ideas given form, as if someone had drawn them from the margins of an alien textbook on geometry and forgotten physics. Across the globe, they arrived in unison. One over Nairobi, another over Buenos Aires, the third above New York City, eclipsing the Hudson with its ominous silhouette. News channels scrambled to cover the event, but the footage was almost surreal. No weapons, no signals, no movement beyond descent and stillness. Humanity as a whole held its breath. Admiral Elias Monroe watched from the observation deck at Earth Defense Command in Geneva. The room buzzed with activity, but he stood motionless, hands behind his back, gaze locked on the live feed from New York. "They're not doing anything," said Dr. Mira Halden, Chief of Science and Xenocryptography. Her voice cracked slightly, betraying awe. Yet, Monroe replied. He had spent 3 decades in orbital defense, a relic of the post-contact rehearsal era where every government simulation modeled alien invasions based on either Hollywood fiction or Cold War paranoia. None of those scenarios ever began with stillness. Stillness was unsettling. Moments later, every active satellite experienced a blackout. Communications held, but telemetry vanished. No readings, no data, no digital analysis, just blank space where sensor input should have been. They weren't invisible, they were unknowable. The world's response was surprisingly calm. Perhaps it was because the ships had not fired a single shot, or because after decades of watching apocalyptic fiction, most people had quietly decided that the end, when it came, would be more dramatic, louder. Instead, there was a kind of quiet reverence, as though the gods had finally arrived, and all they wanted was to be seen. It wasn't until 24 hours later that the message came. Not through radio or encoded light, but through every screen, every speaker, every smart device in existence. Even devices powered off flickered to life. Hospitals, homes, military bases, everywhere. The voice was warm, gentle, neither male nor female, and translated seamlessly into every human language. People of Earth, we are the Veri Concord. We are not conquerors nor missionaries. We are those who have survived what waits in the dark between galaxies. We offer protection, shelter, continuance. The message was short. No commands, no threats, just an offer. The United Nations convened a joint emergency assembly for the first time in its history that included military, scientific, religious, and cultural delegates. Earth Defense Command was given priority seat. Admiral Monroe sat in the front row beside Dr. Halden and Secretary General Okonkwo. No one spoke much. The chamber, usually chaotic, was tense, focused, united for once. Then the Veri entered. They didn't teleport. They didn't shimmer into view. Instead, a single figure emerged through the chamber doors as if it had walked from outside. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, its skin shimmering with fractal patterns of silver and muted blue. It wore no clothing but radiated formality. It had no visible mouth, but when it spoke, the sound entered not just ears but thoughts. I am Arvelesh, envoy of the Veri Concord. We offer what we once refused long ago. A warning, a shield, a second chance. Everyone listened in still silence. Arvalesh extended a long, digitless hand, projecting a star map into the air. Constellations shimmered, warped, and then darkened. Your galaxy is not safe. Ancient forces move in the void, not out of malice but hunger. They are not ships, not empires, not minds. They are erasures. They erase history, thought, memory, identity. What they consume cannot even be mourned. He turned slowly, eyes locking on individuals, not intimidating, simply present. Your species is young, bold. You reach toward the stars with passion, not patience. That is admirable but dangerous. You are not ready, and the dark bloom it awakens. Murmurs pass through the chamber like wind through dry leaves. We offer you the refuge protocol. We will construct a shield, a temporal veil around your solar system. Nothing will enter. Time will slow. You will sleep through the storm. When the threat is gone, you will awaken, intact, preserved. A silence deeper than before followed. It sounded kind, but Admiral Monroe's jaw clenched. "What will it cost us?" Monroe asked, standing slowly. Arvalesh turned, meeting his gaze. "Nothing. You will give no tribute, surrender no sovereignty. In fact, you will remember none of this until you awaken. Your civilization will resume from where it paused, untouched." Dr. Halden frowned. "You want us to go into stasis?" "Yes, but not evolve, not grow, not resist. Just wait." "Correct. The darkness cannot be fought. It can only be waited out. This is how we survived." The implications burned in Monroe's mind. Safety without awareness, survival without memory. A civilization paused indefinitely. It was a kindness, but a sterile one. "It's a coffin," he muttered. The chamber fell quiet. Later, alone on the command balcony, Monroe looked out over Lake Geneva. Dr. Halden joined him, carrying 2 mugs of synthetic coffee. "You think it's a trap?" she asked. He shook his head. "I think it's worse. I think it's real. And I think they believe they are saving us." "And you'd rather fight?" "I'd rather live," Monroe said, then sipped. "Even if it kills me." She smiled faintly. "They offer us protection, but what they never ask is what it means to deserve it." He turned to her. "They want us to sleep through our chance to make meaning. I won't let humanity go quietly." And so the seeds of resistance were planted, not against a hostile invasion, but against a kindness too sterile to be human. Because sometimes the most dangerous offer is one that asks nothing and expects even less in return. Let me know when you're ready for part 2, or if you'd like to adjust tone, pacing, or themes before continuing. The days that followed the Verais offer were unlike any other in human history. Nations that had once struggled to agree on trade policies or climate targets now sat shoulder to shoulder, unified not by alliance but by uncertainty. Across the planet, governments formed the first true global coalition under a single directive: evaluate the offer. The name they gave it, the Refuge Protocol, felt sterile. But everyone understood what it meant: a sleep, a hiding, a surrender. Inside Earth Defense Command, Admiral Monroe stood before the central display in the Geneva War Room. The projection showed the solar system, Earth, Mars, the moons, the stations, and surrounding it, a growing shell of theoretical energy labeled Temporal Shield Projected Impact Zone. The Verai had provided the specs. The construction could begin within weeks. They had sent drones and generators to assist. Everything was ready except the human spirit. "We're building our own tomb," Monroe muttered. His voice barely registered, but Dr. Halden beside him heard. "They're not offering a tomb, Elias," she said softly. "They're offering a time capsule. A capsule implies someone comes back to open it. She paused. Do you think they won't? He didn't answer, because that wasn't the real question. The real question was, should we let them? The next session of the Global Emergency Council was held in the Lunar Citadel, a neutral zone constructed years earlier for international space diplomacy. Monroe, Halden, and a dozen representatives from every continent stood under the transparent dome, Earth floating like a fragile marble above them. "This is not surrender," said the delegate from Norway, voice calm but insistent. "It's survival." "It's stagnation," countered Minister Asham Mandal of India. "We've fought too long to reach this point. To freeze ourselves now would be to erase our future before it's written." The American representative, Secretary Dana Bell, turned to Monroe. "Admiral, what's your assessment?" Monroe straightened. "The Veri mean what they say, I believe that, but I also believe they are wrong." "In what way?" "They think this threat, the dark bloom, is a force of nature, like a black hole, unstoppable, but they only survived it by running. They assume that's the only way." "And you think we can fight it?" "I think we should try." There was a pause. "You'd risk all of humanity," someone whispered. Monroe stepped forward. "I'd risk everything for the right to try." The silence that followed was heavier than any weapon he had ever faced. In private later that night, Monroe sat in a quiet corner of the Citadel, reviewing a report from Orbital Command. The Veri drones had begun seeding the upper atmosphere with the first stages of the shield's foundation. No permission asked. No resistance given, as if the answer had already been decided. Dr. Halden found him there holding 2 drinks. "You always drink black tea when you're about to do something reckless," she said. He accepted the cup. "Tradition." She sat across from him. "You want to stop this?" He nodded, "But not just stop. I want an alternative." "You want to fight?" "I want to live standing." A long silence passed between them. "We need a vote," she said. "There's no time. The construction begins in days." "Then we don't need a vote," she said. "We need a gesture." And that's when the idea began, not a protest, not a rebellion, a request. The next morning, Monroe addressed the Global Emergency Council again. "If we accept the refuge protocol," he said, "then we do so in fear, not reason. We do so because we trust another species to define our limits." He turned to the Veri envoy, who had observed all debates silently from a column of blue mist. "You've said the darkness cannot be fought. I challenge that." The room stirred. "I request that Earth be allowed to send a mission beyond the veil, to investigate this threat, not to provoke, not to stop the shield, but to learn." Arvelesh shimmered subtly. "This is not advisable." It wasn't a question. The council erupted. Some called it madness, others called it suicide, but a few, just enough, called it human. The vote passed, by the narrowest margin, and thus the refuge mission was born. A single vessel, a single crew, a single chance, to find the truth beyond what the Veri feared to face, to confront the nightmare waiting in the dark, to show the universe that when humanity is told to run, sometimes we roar instead. The ship wasn't born out of hope. It was born out of refusal. The design came from scraps, old schematics from the Mars forge yards, abandoned experiments in exotic field containment, off-the-books propulsion projects tucked away in subterranean vaults after the Lunar Accord of '52. None of it was legal. All of it was human. Admiral Monroe stood in the dark hangar bay beneath Armstrong Crater, watching the skeletal form of the ship take shape. Sparks fell like dying stars as welders in pressurized suits carved armor plating into position. The vessel wasn't large by Verai standards, barely 200 meters, but it had something no ship in the Concorde had ever carried: defiance. She didn't have a name yet. That would come later. Names mattered. Names had weight. For now, she was simply the project. Dr. Halden arrived with a tablet in her hands, eyes red-rimmed from sleepless hours. Internal architecture's complete. The fusion core's been modified. We're integrating the gravitic mesh system from the Lasker project, the one that melted its own engineers. They shouldn't have been standing so close. Monroe grinned. He admired her recklessness when it was calculated. "What's her mission range?" he asked. 200 light-years without resupply. She's small, but she's lean, fast, and more importantly, she doesn't think like a Verai ship. Good. He turned to the ship again. "This time," he said quietly, "we're not designing a symbol, we're designing a weapon that thinks it's a question." The crew came next. Recruitment was quiet, not secret, but not broadcast either. The Council had granted permission for the mission under the stipulation that it remain a human operation. No alien advisors, no oversight, not even the Verai would interfere. Still, the applications flooded in. Thousands of them. Some were elite naval officers. Some were rogue physicists. Some were kids barely out of university with coding portfolios that could make AI nervous. But Monroe didn't choose them by resume. He chose them by answers. Each applicant had to answer one question: what scares you the most about going? Those who said dying were cut immediately. Those who said failing were considered. Those who said being forgotten were hired. Captain Leona Rourke was the first chosen, a former pilot from the Titan frontier. She'd lost her right arm in a skirmish with a pirate faction near Europa. She replaced it with something better. Her flight logs read like war poetry: fast, brutal, precise. "I don't follow protocol," she told Monroe during her interview, "but I don't lose." He hired her on the spot. Then came Chief Engineer Romesh Patel, who had once rerouted an orbital mining rig's power through a toothbrush to save 6 crew members during a collapse. He joined for the challenge, not the glory. "I like fixing what shouldn't be fixable," he said, shrugging. "And if we die, at least I'll die trying to invent something no one else dared to." Dr. Halden joined the mission herself, against every advisory panel's recommendation. "You're too valuable to risk in the field," one councilman had argued. She'd laughed. "That's exactly why I'm going." The last to join was Dax Mercer. No military background, no scientific accolades, just a quiet man from the Appalachian Hills with eyes like weathered stone and a mind that could chart hyperspace routes by feel. He never gave a speech, never asked for rank. He simply showed up during screening, passed every test, and said nothing until Monroe asked why he was there. "My father was a miner," Dax said. "Died digging through bedrock for a world he'd never see. But he believed we'd get there someday. I want to be there when we finally do." And that was enough. The naming ceremony was unorthodox. No parade, no anthem, just the crew, the admiral, and the ship. The outer hull had been painted matte gray, practical, heat-resistant, radar-disruptive. But across the forward fuselage under the cockpit visor were 4 black letters stenciled in with the precision of old war memorials: memory. When asked why, Monroe answered simply, "Because if we fail, someone should remember who we were." In the final week before launch, the Verai envoy Arvalesh returned. He stood in the engineering bay watching as Patel and Halden calibrated the singularity dampener. The air shimmered around the ship's core like it was already trying to escape the rules of gravity. "This is not anger," Arvalesh said. Patel blinked. Sorry. This mission, this refusal, it does not come from wrath. That is not what I sense. No, Halden said without looking up. It comes from grief. Why grieve what has not yet been lost? Because we know what we're risking. Arvilesh moved closer to the ship's frame, placing one elongated limb against the hull. I do not wish for you to fail. We won't, Monroe said, appearing beside him. But if we do, we'll fail in motion. The envoy tilted his head. You are unlike other species, reckless, hopeful, loud. We get that a lot. Arvilesh withdrew. Then may your memory be worth the noise. Launch day arrived without ceremony. No cameras, no reporters. Just a quiet relay message sent from Geneva to Luna Command and a single confirmation signal from the Memories Bridge. Inside the ship, Rourke ran her fingers across the flight controls, every gesture familiar, every switch old muscle memory. Patel monitored the core's readings, murmuring to himself. Halden adjusted the sensor suite, configuring the filters to scan for anything that didn't make sense, and Dax Mercer just stared at the stars on the display. They all waited for the final command. Monroe's voice came through, steady and grave. You are the first of us to leave, not for conquest, not for survival, but for meaning. What you find, we may never know. What you risk, we will never forget. Go not as soldiers, but as questions the universe must answer. Rourke smiled. Then she spoke the final words. Memory engage. The engines roared to life, not with fire, but with silence, and then the ship vanished. No light, no ripple, just absence, like a breath held in the lungs of history. And so humanity reached out once again, not to flee, not to hide, but to understand what even gods had chosen to fear. The memory reappeared not with sound, but with sensation. The moment they dropped from FTL, every human on board felt it, like stepping into water that wasn't quite water, like hearing a song with your bones. The stars didn't look wrong. They looked aware, as if the void itself had turned its face toward them and whispered, finally, awake. Captain Leona Rourke's hands hovered over the controls. She said nothing for a long moment, then finally muttered, This isn't space. What does that mean? Halden asked, already flipping through sensor panels. This feels like when you walk into a room and realize something bad happened there. Or is about to, Dax added softly from navigation. He wasn't looking at any instruments. He was staring out the viewport, brows furrowed, like he was listening to something no one else could hear. Chief Engineer Patel's voice crackled over internal comms. We're stable for now, but we've got gravity fluctuations I can't explain. Feels like the ship's mass keeps changing, or space around it is cheating. Halden's monitors flickered. EM readings are inconsistent. Background radiation it's pulsing in patterns. That shouldn't happen. Dax finally spoke again. Captain, I don't think we're in the same frame of reference anymore. Rourke turned. Explain. He stood up and walked to the main display, bringing up their position data. We plotted our jump based on triangulated Confederation star charts and the Veri coordinates, but nothing's here. No pulsars, no binary systems, just a wall of distortion. We're not where we're supposed to be. So where are we? Dax hesitated. I think we're outside. They spent the next 6 hours mapping. The memory sensors were the most advanced Earth had ever produced, augmented with adapted Veri lensing arrays, quantum entanglement data streams, and dark matter resonators. But even with all that, the picture was incomplete. Space wasn't empty here. It writhed. The blackness pulsed with slow, steady contractions like a breath held and released over millennia. Within that darkness, enormous structures drifted, unmoving yet not inert. Some looked like dead planets carved into impossible geometries. Others resembled shattered megastructures whose pieces hadn't fallen apart because reality itself refused to let go. Dr. Haldon zoomed in on one such formation, a ring-like construct surrounding a sphere of opaque fluid. "It's artificial," she whispered, "but not recent. This was built millions of years ago." Patel's voice came in again, hushed and tight. "Captain, I found damage to our secondary hull sensors. External cause, something touched us." "We're not alone," Dax said. "That's when the first signal hit them. It wasn't a transmission. It wasn't even a sound. It was pressure on the mind, not the body, like a heavy stare pressed between the ears." All 4 crew members winced at the same time, hands to temples. "What the hell was that?" Rourke hissed. Haldon stumbled toward her terminal, fingers trembling. "It wasn't language, not even symbols. It was intention. Something wants us to know it's here." "Patel," Rourke barked, "shield frequency modulation now. Put up everything we've got, magnetics, gravitic mesh." "Aye, but if it can reach our thoughts, I doubt a few fields will stop it." "I don't care. I don't like being whispered to." Outside the ship, the void shimmered, and then from the blackness, something moved. They didn't see it all at once. First, it was shadows shifting where no light should be. Then points of luminescence blinked open, like stars waking in the wrong places, pulsing with alien rhythm. As the memory adjusted its filters, the outline emerged. A vast creature, larger than anything Earth had ever recorded. 4,000 kilometers long, serpentine in form, with ridges of bioluminescent tissue arranged in fractal spirals. Along its sides pulsed what looked like cities of light, but moved like muscle contractions. A floating biomechanical god, half alive, half memory. Dax breathed out, barely audible. "It's dreaming." "Are you sure it's not awake?" Haldon whispered. He nodded. "It's like it sees us, but through a haze, like we're not quite real yet." Rourke leaned forward, voice steady. "Does it match anything in the Veri data?" "No," Haldon replied. "But that may be the most terrifying part. They never mentioned this." As they watched, the creature turned, not with movement but with perspective. It didn't swim. It reoriented spacetime around itself. And now it was looking directly at them. A low harmonic pulse swept through the ship, non-damaging but penetrating. The lights dimmed. The gravity field buckled. Instruments went blank for a full 7 seconds before rebooting. And then a voice, not through speakers, through memory. Each crew member heard different things. For Haldon, it was her father's voice, calm and instructive. For Rourke, it was her drill sergeant's gravel snarl. Patel heard his daughter laughing. Dax heard nothing, only stillness. The voice said one thing in whatever form it chose. "Why are you here, children of noise?" Haldon managed to speak first. "We're here to understand, to learn or to warn." Rourke straightened. "Both." A silence fell again, but it wasn't absence. It was evaluation. Then the stars themselves seemed to ripple as the creature's mind spoke again. "You carry the scent of others. The ones who came screaming, they did not listen, they only fought, and so they were fed upon. You are different." Dax finally spoke. "You weren't the threat, were you?" "No." Another pulse. This time it brought memories, not theirs, but fragments shared. They saw the Confederation fleets entering the dark, saw them panic, fire, die. Not because they were attacked, because they attacked first. Because they feared what they did not try to understand. Patel swore softly. They triggered their own extinction. The creature continued. "We were made to guard what sleeps deeper still. We are the sentinels, the warning, not the storm." Haldon's heart pounded. "Then what's the storm?" There was no answer, not because the creature refused, because the answer was too large to be put into words. The crew stood in stunned silence. They had come seeking danger. What they found was purpose, guardians shaped by an ancient civilization, keeping vigil over something buried in the folds of space-time. And now that humanity had found them, the equation had changed. You have chosen knowledge over fear, the being whispered across their synapses. And so you will be tested differently. Rourke squared her shoulders. We're ready. You are not, but you will be. The creature pulsed again. This time the memory systems lit up, downloads incoming, not data, not code, understanding, blueprints, warnings, history older than physics. Patel stared at the incoming stream. Captain, these files, they are rewriting our science as they download. Halden turned pale. They're giving us tools, ideas, ways to survive what's coming. Dax, still silent, looked beyond the viewport again, and for the first time he saw what lay beneath. Not a creature, not a machine, but a chasm in reality itself. Moving, breathing, and hungry, they would have to go deeper, because what humanity had awakened was not the answer. It was the gate to a question too ancient for the stars to remember. And now they were expected to walk through. The gate wasn't made of matter. It didn't shimmer with power or radiate heat. It simply wasn't supposed to be there. A wrinkle in the certainty of reality, where light hesitated and space folded into ideas no telescope could render. The crew of the memory stood on the observation deck, silently watching as the ancient guardian, the titanic sentinel they'd met just hours before, pulled away, dissolving into the darkness like breath into winter air. It left no trace, no warning, just coordinates, and a feeling that something far older than language had now invited them further. Captain Leona Rourke looked at her crew. "We're not turning back," she said. It wasn't a question. No one disagreed. Dax Mercer sat in the pilot's chair, hands resting lightly on the controls, though he hadn't touched them in minutes. The ship had begun responding to thought, not command, a side effect of the downloads from the ancient entity. His fingers twitched. "I can feel it pulling us," he whispered. "Define pulling," Halden said, her voice cautious. "Not in space," Dax murmured. "In logic, it wants us to cross a boundary we don't understand." Rourke nodded. "Do it." The ship's systems hummed, if that word still meant anything. The engines activated, but not in any recognizable sequence. Lights pulsed in unknown rhythms. Symbols flashed across the screens that no one had programmed. Some looked disturbingly like bones. Then the stars vanished. The memory crossed into something that wasn't a place. The moment they entered, every sensor on the ship flatlined. Chronometers stopped counting. Mass and distance no longer applied. The hull creaked, not from pressure but confusion. It was like space didn't know how to treat them anymore. Rourke clutched the arm of her seat. "Is this hyperspace?" Halden shook her head. "Hyperspace has rules. This is conceptual." "You mean we're flying through an idea. I mean we're in a memory that refuses to die." Patel's voice came in from engineering, tight and restrained. "Captain, our fusion core is functioning, but it's bleeding energy. Bleeding. It's not a leak. The laws of thermodynamics are being reinterpreted. Into what? Don't know yet, maybe a prayer." No one laughed. Then came the visions, at first just flashes in the corner of their eyes. A planet turning red, oceans boiling, then entire systems blinking out. Not with fire, but with emptiness, as if someone had erased them from time rather than destroyed them. View screen shifted, and suddenly they weren't seeing space. They were seeing histories, civilizations, species, empires, some vast and elegant, others wild and brutal, all gone. "Doctor," Halden gasped as a new image surged into view, a ring world the size of Jupiter wrapped in bands of gold and obsidian. "It's the Vithelari Dominion," she whispered. "I read about them in Confederation records. They built artificial stars, said to have conquered entropy itself." "They're dead," Rourke said quietly. "They vanished," Haldon corrected. "The Concorde always claimed it was natural collapse, but this shows something else." The image zoomed. They saw the Dominion's capital system, a place of symphonic architecture and engineered moons consumed, not by weapons, not even by creatures, by shadows that moved like hunger, shapes that had no edges, that devoured light itself, that made the absence of existence feel like a predator. Patel's voice came again. "Brittle, Captain, I think we're watching the first course of something's appetite." The memory systems flickered. A sound echoed across the ship, not through comms but in their teeth. A warble, a moan, something that tasted like grief and sounded like the end of choices. Then a signal, not from the ship, from outside. It was a language but not meant to be spoken. It was the dying thoughts of a species as it was being eaten alive. Dax collapsed to the floor. Rourke rushed to him. "Dax." He blinked, sweat soaking through his flight suit. "I saw them, 1,000 minds screaming at once. Not in pain, in shock. They didn't understand what was happening." "What was it?" He sat up slowly. "A presence, not curious, not cruel, just hungry." Haldon stood frozen at her console. "There's more coming." "More what?" "More. Echoes, other memories, other deaths." And then the screen changed again. They saw the Caerlean swarm, a species that communicated entirely through light and pheromones. Their hives had spread across 60 systems, peaceful, efficient, insectoid intelligence that outpaced AI in complexity. Gone. No war, no meteor, just erased. Another wave. The Zurani paladins, warriors who rode solar wind and carved religions into the skin of planets. Consumed. Then the Nalak dissonance, a species so alien the Confederation still hadn't classified them. Their consciousness existed as sonic waves across gas giants. Now silence. Hundreds more. Entire species whose only mistake was evolving in the wrong part of the galaxy at the wrong time. Haldon covered her mouth. "This isn't history, it's a menu." Patel's voice trembled. "Captain, I think we're in the digestive tract of something bigger than this universe allows." Dax stood unsteady. "And it hasn't fed in a while." The lights on the bridge dimmed. The ship's AI whispered across the cabin. "External topology degrading. Reality consistency, 41%. Rourke slammed her hand down. "Give me exit vectors." "No vectors found. This region does not acknowledge outside." "Then punch it anyway." Dax touched the controls, eyes distant. "Captain, if we leave now, we'll lose this data. The Verai never got this far. No one has." "I don't care. We're not dying here." Haldon spoke quietly. "We might not get a choice." Because something was watching. From within the blackness, a shape emerged. Not as massive as the Guardian, but sharper. Angular, focused. It wasn't a creature. It was a collector, a being forged from the death of 1,000 minds. Its body flickered with absorbed languages. Its eyes, if they could be called that, cycled through species it had known. Its wings folded space. Its form changed every second as if it could not decide which face to wear. And when it spoke, the universe shuddered. "You are not like the others. You are not yet ripe." Rourke swallowed. "What do you want?" "To remember you as you remember them." Its limbs unfurled. Then the memory fired. The ship's prototype weapons, railguns modified with dark energy recoil, punched holes in the anomaly. They did not hurt the creature, but they drew its attention. As it lunged, time fractured. The bridge froze. Systems screamed. And then the Guardian returned. The ancient entity they met in Part 4 reappeared in a cascade of gravity waves, placing itself between the memory and the collector. It did not speak, it sang, not in sound but in truth. The collector hesitated, and in that breath of hesitation the memory escaped, ripped backward through the tears in space, fleeing the feast that had not yet begun. The stars returned, so did the pain. Halden threw up. Dax collapsed again. Rourke's left eye bled. Patel's systems had fried half the power grid, but they were alive. Barely. And as the Guardian vanished once more, one final message echoed in their minds. The feast begins soon. You have tasted its scent. Now you must choose, run with the frightened or become what the darkness cannot consume. They did not speak for a long time. Not until Halden whispered the thought that none of them wanted to say aloud. We're not explorers anymore. Rourke met her eyes. No, we're witnesses. And what they'd witnessed might be the galaxy's last warning or its first chance. The silence after the escape was deeper than the vacuum outside. Captain Rourke sat on the command deck, face bloodied from a ruptured vessel behind her eye, staring at the slowly rotating starfield. There were no threats in view, no distortions, no cosmic horrors breathing down their necks. And yet, the entire crew felt as if they were standing on a cliff's edge, staring into a wind that blew from the end of time. Below deck, Chief Engineer Patel moved like a ghost between blown relays and half-melted bulkheads. Systems groaned. Power flickered. The memory had been pushed beyond every theoretical limit humanity had ever written. Even Halden, ever composed, sat cross-legged in the dark of the science module, reviewing the incomprehensible data still trickling in from the Guardian's memory transfer, symbols that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. And Dax, he was dreaming with his eyes open again. It was Rourke who broke the silence. I need to know what we saw, she said, voice hoarse over ship-wide comms. I need to know what that thing was, the collector. Halden responded from below. It's not a predator, Leona, not in the way we understand it. Then what the hell is it? A librarian. That stopped everyone. What? It doesn't destroy civilizations. It archives them. Every species it consumes is stored inside it. Their thoughts, their history, their language, their last moments. It remembers everything. Why? Because it's part of something worse. Dax appeared in the doorway, pale and quiet. The collector isn't the enemy, he said. Rourke turned. You were unconscious when it showed up. I was inside it. Everyone stared. He sat down slowly, looking not at them but past them. It's not evil, it's a node, a neuron, it's part of a network, the darkness. It's not one thing, it's a collective intelligence built out of what it eats. Halden stood, like a neural web. More than that, it's a mind made of extinct species. Each one becomes a thought, a memory, a strategy. The more it devours, the smarter it gets. Patel chimed in over comms. That's why it couldn't predict us. Rourke nodded slowly. Because we're new. No, Dax said, because we're still writing ourselves. Suddenly, the ship pulsed with energy. Every panel blinked with blue light. Not red for warning, not green for systems normal, but blue, like calm before revelation. Then, in the center of the bridge, the Guardian appeared, not in the flesh, but as a projection of starlight and gravitational echoes, its form towering, undulating in and out of comprehension. No words, no questions, just a presence. Rourke stood slowly. You saved us. It pulsed. We need you. Halden stepped forward. Why? You are not yet part of the archive. You are unpredictable. The darkness fears unpredictability. Dax narrowed his eyes. You want to make us weapons. We want to make you possible. Rourke scowled. That's a dangerous difference. and a necessary one. The Guardian expanded, revealing systems of stars, maps so old that even Veri records had forgotten them. It showed dead galaxies, silent black voids, places where time didn't flow anymore. This is the cost of waiting. Halden whispered, the Veri never saw this. They chose safety. You chose consequence. The projection flickered again, this time showing two paths. One was familiar, Earth, surrounded by the projected refuge protocol, a cradle of stasis, a tomb of preservation. The other path was chaos, ships of hybrid design, half human, half guardian, technology not yet imagined, a fleet not of conformity but of adaptive intent. Rourke stepped forward. What's the trade? The Guardian pulsed brighter. We give you knowledge, tools, potential. In return, you promise not to run. Patel exhaled. You want an oath. We want an anchor. Dax tilted his head. You want us to infect the future with human irrationality. Exactly. Rourke looked at her crew. Halden, scientist turned prophet. Patel, engineer turned alchemist. Dax, navigator turned oracle, and herself. She was the weapon that wouldn't bend. Tell us what we have to do, Rourke said. The projection shifted. No more maps. No more metaphors, just instructions. How to build what they called the fracture engines, drives that could bend local reality and exist in unstable topologies. How to bond with the sentient metals harvested from collapsed dimensions. How to weave quantum empathy matrices into their hulls, allowing ships to feel with their crews, to learn, to evolve. Halden gasped as the code scrolled across her console. This will change everything, every law of physics we know. Patel laughed softly, eyes wide. We're going to need bigger wrenches. Dax simply said, we're going to become dangerous. But the Guardian wasn't done. One last image flickered into existence. Earth darkened, its skies burned. The refuge protocol shield fractured, failed. The Veri ships gone. Above it the collector watched, not with malice but with curiosity, waiting for the last page to turn. This is what happens if you wait. Rourke clenched her fists. No more waiting. She turned to her crew. Set course for home. We've got blueprints to deliver and a war to start preparing for. Dax input the coordinates. Course locked. Punch it. As the memory jumped back toward the solar system, trailing starlight and something more than light, the Guardian whispered one final message through the void. The darkness is not afraid of force. It is afraid of imagination. And humanity, fractured, stubborn, illogical, was about to give it a reason to fear both. The memory dropped out of FTL in Earth's orbit, but the home they'd left was no longer the same. Vast, translucent pylons now encased the planet like an unborn egg encased in protective gel. The refuge protocol was already halfway complete. The Veri weren't waiting. From Luna Station to Mars, the Confederation's quiet presence had multiplied. Peaceful drones, diplomatic envoys, gentle voices whispering safety through protocol. They called it security. Admiral Monroe, watching from Earth Defense HQ, called it sedation. The moment the memory's signature hit Earth's long-range sensors, alarms triggered across every known monitoring system, not because the ship was dangerous, but because it was impossible. No vessel of its mass, configuration, or energy profile had ever been logged. The Veri flagged it as an anomaly, but for the humans on the ground, it was a miracle. Admiral Monroe stood at the edge of the Luna hangar as the memory docked. When the hatch opened and Captain Leona Rourke stepped out, he almost didn't recognize her. Her gait had changed, fluid, precise, like a dancer trained in low gravity. Her eyes shimmered faintly, and when she looked at him, it was like she saw everything. Behind her, Patel carried a case containing the Guardian's data core. Halden followed, fingers flicking through a holographic UI that hadn't existed when they left. Dax stepped last, barefoot, calm, as if the stars had marked him. They weren't just crew anymore. They were the first of something else. In the debriefing room, silence reigned. The Verai envoy Arvalesh had arrived in person, a rare event, and now watched the Memory's crew with a flickering uncertainty never before seen in his fractal form. "You have been altered," he said finally. Rourke nodded. "Yes, you are infected." Halden leaned forward. "No, we're augmented. We detected unauthorized downloads, structural mutations, cortical expansions." "Would you prefer we brought back nothing?" Rourke asked. "We preferred you didn't return at all," Arvalesh said. The room went still. Monroe's jaw clenched. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Because you've seen what we've hidden," the envoy replied. "And now we can no longer pretend we're in control." The data they carried unraveled like prophecy. Not just technology, but maps, not of stars, but of failure. Dozens of species, hundreds of empires, the Verai had known, had documented, had withheld, not out of cruelty but fear. "The darkness consumes not with violence," Halden explained to the council, "but with understanding. The moment you become predictable, you become digestible. And you think humanity is unpredictable?" asked the representative from the Mars colonial bloc. "We don't think it," Monroe said. "We bet everything on it." They shared the blueprints, the fracture engines, the sentient hulls, the quantum symbiosis layers. Patel presented the data core with a single warning: "Use it wrong, and you'll burn through reality." The Confederation observers weren't pleased. But Earth had questions again. The transformation began within weeks. Labs that had once bickered over research grants now worked around the clock. Old rivalries turned to collaboration under the weight of existential clarity. Every nation, every orbital colony, every independent engineering syndicate received copies of the data. No central authority, no permission gate. Knowledge spread like rebellion, and with it, humanity changed. Test pilots reported dreams of the ships before they were finished. Engineers found blueprints writing themselves based on crew temperaments. Children began drawing creatures from memory's archives with frightening accuracy. The first prototype vessel, grown partially from self-aware alloys and constructed in low Earth orbit, was christened the Echo of Intention. It wasn't launched, it was born. The Verai requested meetings, private, urgent. In the third such meeting, Arvalesh looked at Monroe and whispered what no one else dared say. "You are dangerous." "Because we think," Monroe asked. "Because you refuse." "To what?" "To be afraid of becoming more than what you were." Monroe smiled. "Exactly. But not all were pleased. A faction within the Confederation labeled Earth's new fleet as an instability. They warned of mutation, cultural contamination, technological corruption. They called for containment. Admiral Monroe's response was broadcast across every interstellar frequency. "We were offered safety in stasis. We chose to live loud. You don't have to like that, but you damn well won't stop it." On the edge of the solar system, the second wave of memory-class ships began patrolling. Each one was different, not by design but by choice. They adapted to their crews. Some had no bridge, but functioned as distributed nervous systems. Others could fold light to create corridors of impossible approach vectors. One could translate thoughts into physical probability fields. And the most terrifying of all, a ship called Defiance Rewritten, crewed by survivors of the Omega Gate mission, had begun teaching itself how to die and come back stronger. It was not a fleet, it was a declaration. Then the warning came, from beyond Confederation space, from an outpost long thought abandoned, a signal, fragmented, faint, but clear in its final moment. The dark has begun to echo. Earth's council turned to Monroe, he turned to Rourke, she turned to Dax, and Dax calmly, solemnly nodded once. "We'll need more than weapons," he said. "We'll need a story." That night on the moon, beneath the shield the Verai had nearly completed around Earth, children pointed at the sky not to fear the darkness but to name the ships that now sailed against it. Humanity had returned, but not as what it was, as something new, something that could not be catalogued, something that the darkness had never seen before, and perhaps would never survive seeing again. The darkness arrived early. It did not roar into the galaxy with fire or fleets. It unfolded like a wound in the fabric of space had been waiting to bleed. Entire sectors blinked out of contact, not destroyed, not even overrun, just gone. Gone in ways sensors couldn't trace and minds couldn't fully grasp. Memories of those places frayed as if even recollection was digestible. The Confederation panicked. They assembled their fleets, sleek, ancient vessels commanded by consensus AIs, bound by protocols layered over millennia. They sent emissaries, warnings, demands for coordination. But when they looked toward Earth, they didn't find silence. They found ships already on the move. The first encounter took place near the Eridanus Drift, a dead zone long left untouched due to spatial instability. A dark wave rolled from its heart, not energy, not mass, but anti-pattern, a cancellation field of expectation. Confederation fleets fired first. Their weapons collapsed upon impact with the unknown. Logic itself bent. The ships, unable to adapt, dissolved into geometric entropy. And then came the human ships. Memory-class vessels, adaptive hulls blooming with nano-lattice formations, emerged from impossible vectors. Their weapons were not beams or missiles. They were decisions, collapsing probability into action. The darkness reached for them and missed, because humanity didn't move like strategy. It moved like chaos with purpose. Captain Leona Rourke stood aboard the Vigil laughing, a newly forged vessel that pulsed with semi-organic life beneath her boots. Her crew numbered only 12, but the ship could change form in mid-flight, recalibrate its systems based on crew emotion, and absorb ambient energy from collapsing enemy fields. "Weapons ready?" she asked. Chief Patel grinned, older and scarred but alive. "Define weapons." Dr. Halden, now overseeing 9 research teams from the bridge itself, added, "We've configured the song drive." The what? A frequency pulse of shared memory, not designed to kill, designed to confuse. It makes the darkness remember what it can't understand. Rourke smiled. "Let's remind it who we are." In the council chambers of the Confederation, panic morphed into awe. The humans weren't just resisting. They were unraveling the rules of engagement. Every memory-class ship operated differently. One vessel, Hollow Laughter, disappeared entirely, existing across 7 localized timelines simultaneously, striking from the one where the enemy reacted worst. Another, unsaid, simply refused to be targeted. Enemy systems recognized it, aimed at it, and then forgot it existed. And then there was Forgekin, piloted by a human-AI hybrid known only as Karev, which spoke directly to the darkness in harmonics laced with paradox. The message: "You only know what has been, we are what might be." But not all humans made it back. The kindred bold was lost over the Helix expanse. Its last transmission was a message whispered in code. It's learning us. Make sure you don't teach it the same way twice. The crew knew what they'd done. They left false patterns, dead-end tactics, mimicry of humanity without the soul, and the darkness. It digested the wrong lesson, which made the next human strike all the more devastating. On Earth, Admiral Elias Monroe stood beneath the half-constructed megastructure known as the Unwritten Gate, a ring not of steel, but of possibility, built using quantum-reflective alloys from Omega-7. Its sole purpose was not travel, but disruption, a generator that would fire narrative dissonance into the heart of the Dark Collective. A story it couldn't finish, because humanity wasn't just unpredictable, it was unfinished by design. One final meeting occurred between Monroe and Arvelesh. The Verai envoy was flickering now, its form dim, fragmented. "We should have stopped you," Arvelesh admitted. "No," Monroe said, watching the construction continue in orbit. "You should have joined us. We were trying to preserve what was, and we're trying to survive what's next." Arvelesh looked away. "The Confederation cannot follow you." "You won't have to," Monroe replied. "We'll lead." And lead they did. The memory fleet tore open corridors of chaos across the galaxy, not to destroy but to rewrite. They didn't fight to win. They fought to redefine the battle. Where the Confederation measured risk, humans danced in its center. Where the darkness predicted logic, humans offered contradiction. And where extinction expected silence, humans sang, loud, discordant, beautiful. A new species emerged, not biologically but culturally. Humanity ascendant. No longer a people clinging to one world, but an idea, viral and defiant, spreading across star systems like a spark too wild to capture. And in the heart of the void, the collector paused. For the first time in its eons of consumption, it hesitated. It had devoured so many truths, so many structures, but humanity had offered something it could not process. A joke it didn't understand, because humans, fragile, illogical, contradictory, weren't just survivors. They were the glitch in the universe's code, the chaos against the algorithm, the child who laughed in the dark and called it friend. And so the war continued, not with dominance, but with defiance. The darkness would press, it would adapt, but humanity would not be out-evolved, because they had learned the secret: you don't win by being stronger, you win by being impossible to finish. On the final page of the memory crew's transmission to Earth, a single sentence remained: "We are not a race, we are a refusal." And the darkness, old as entropy, finally understood. This was a war it might not win,